I'm Nancy, 32 female. I live in a modest apartment in the city, working as an architectural designer, a job I love because it's all about creating stable, beautiful, and functional spaces for people, everything my own family life was not. For years, I believed that if I worked hard enough, if I was useful enough, I could finally earn the security and love I craved from my parents. This story is about how they let me build that security with my own two hands, only to rip it away and give it to the one person who had never worked for anything in her life. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It all started on a crisp autumn afternoon, 2 years ago. I was at my parents' house for our obligatory Sunday dinner. Their home was a sprawling, comfortable place in the suburbs where I grew up, a place filled with the ghosts of a childhood spent trying to measure up. My father, Henry, a man who viewed life through the lens of a balance sheet, was holding court at the head of the table. My mother, Hazel, a retired teacher, was fussing over the roast, her movements precise and critical, just like her praise, which was rare and heavily qualified. The conversation, as it often did, turned to my future, or rather my lack of one, according to them. I was 30, single, and renting an apartment that they considered a waste of money. Equity, Nancy, equity, my father would say, tapping his fingers on the table. You're just throwing your salary into a black hole. I'd bite my tongue, reminding myself that my 6-figure salary from a prestigious architectural firm was something to be proud of, even if they saw it as a means to an end they had designed. That day, however, their usual lecture took a different turn. After my mother had cleared the plates, my father leaned back in his chair, a look on his face I'd learned to recognize as the prelude to a grand, life-altering proposal that would primarily benefit him. "Nancy," he began, his voice smooth and paternal, "your mother and I have been talking. We have a solution to your housing situation." I braced myself. "That big backyard," he continued, gesturing vaguely towards the window. "It's wasted space. We're getting older and the upkeep is a lot. What if you were to build a small house back there, a laneway house? You could live in it, rent-free, and be close by to help us out. It's a win-win." My mother chimed in immediately, her voice sweet as honey. "It would be your own little place, dear. You could design it yourself. Imagine, a portfolio piece right in your own backyard." I felt a flicker of hope ignite in my chest. For years, I had dreamed of designing and building my own home. The idea of having a tangible, beautiful creation to call my own was intoxicating. The costs would be significant, but the prospect of living rent-free would allow me to pay off the construction loan quickly. More than that, it felt like an olive branch. Maybe this was their way of finally investing in me, of showing they trusted and valued my skills. "What's the catch?" I asked, my professional skepticism kicking in. "Legally, how would this work?" Henry waved a dismissive hand. "A simple family arrangement. We own the land, you own the building. We'll draw up a simple agreement stating that you have the right to live there for as long as you want. It's for your security, Nancy, to make sure you're always taken care of." It sounded too good to be true. A custom-designed home, no rent, and the chance to be closer to my family, or at least, the idealized version of my family I still clung to. We spent the next few hours sketching out ideas on a napkin. I was buzzing with excitement. I envisioned a sleek, 2-bedroom modern home, sustainable and efficient, with a small studio space for my freelance work. My parents seemed enthusiastic, offering suggestions and praising my designs. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were a team, collaborating on a shared dream. They promised to support me, to handle the permits with their local connections, and to make the process as smooth as possible. The only condition was that I use my savings and secure the construction loan myself. "It's about you building your own asset, your own future," my father had said, and I'd nodded eagerly, completely swallowing the bait. Over the next few months, I poured every spare moment and every spare dollar into the project. I spent weeks perfecting the blueprints, creating a design that was not only beautiful, but also maximized the small footprint. I met with contractors, sourced sustainable materials, and navigated the labyrinth of city zoning laws. My parents were surprisingly helpful at first. My dad, the accountant, helped me structure the loan application to get the best rate. My mom brought lemonade to the constructee. On crew on hot days, I allowed myself to believe that this project was healing the old cracks in our family. I was finally doing something they could understand and appreciate. I was building something of tangible value. The agreement we signed was, as my father promised, simple. It was a one-page document, not even notarized, stating I had funded the construction of the secondary dwelling unit at their address and had the right to reside there indefinitely. It was a tenancy in perpetuity agreement, as my father called it. It felt informal, but it was from my parents. I trusted them. That was my first and biggest mistake. I was so blinded by the dream they were selling me that I ignored the fine print, or in this case, the lack of it. A real lawyer would have laughed it out of the room. But I wasn't dealing with a lawyer, I was dealing with my family. The construction took just over a year and a half. I was on site almost every day, managing the project myself after my day job. I learned to lay tile, I helped with the drywall, and I painted every single wall myself. My savings account dwindled to nothing, and every paycheck went directly to the loan or the suppliers. I was exhausted but exhilarated. I watched my vision come to life, beam by beam, window by window. It was more than a house. It was a testament to my skill, my perseverance, and my hope for a better relationship with the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. As the final coat of paint dried and the kitchen appliances were installed, I stood in the living room, surrounded by the smell of fresh wood and new beginnings, and I felt a profound sense of peace. I had done it. I had built my own home, my own sanctuary. I finally had a place where I belonged, or so I thought. The foundation I had meticulously laid was solid concrete and steel. But the foundation of the promise it was built on was pure sand, about to be washed away by the arrival of a long-overdue storm. The storm had a name: Paige, my younger sister, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. While I was dutiful, responsible, and academically inclined, Paige was the charismatic, beautiful, and perpetually finding herself one. She had floated through life on a cloud of parental funding and effortless charm, moving to Los Angeles after high school to become an actress, a dream that had since morphed into being a moderately successful social media influencer. Her feed was a curated gallery of sun-drenched beaches, expensive brunches, and sponsored posts for dubious wellness teas. My parents adored it. They printed her photos, boasted about her follower count, and sent her money whenever her sponsored posts couldn't quite cover her rent in a trendy LA loft. For the entire year and a half I was building the house, Paige was a distant presence, a face on a video call who would occasionally offer a vapid, "OMG, that's so cute, Nance," when my mom angled the phone to show her the construction progress. She never asked about the cost, the stress, or the work involved. To her, the house was just a quaint little project her boring older sister was doing. I was fine with that. Her absence was a blessing, a quiet space where I could work without the suffocating weight of comparison. The house was about a month from completion when the first tremor was felt. My mom called me, her voice fluttering with an excitement I hadn't heard since Paige was crowned prom queen. "Guess what, honey? Paige is coming home, for good." My heart sank. For good? What happened to her acting career? Her life in LA? Hazel sighed dramatically. "Oh, you know how it is, Nancy. The industry is just so brutal and she's tired of the superficiality. She wants to be closer to family, to get back to her roots." I knew what that meant. It meant Paige's latest boyfriend had dumped her, or her influencer bubble had popped, and she was retreating to her safety net, Mom and Dad. A week later, she arrived, not with a single suitcase, but with a moving truck's worth of designer clothes, half-used yoga mats, and an entitled attitude that filled the main house like a toxic gas. Suddenly, the dynamic shifted. My parents, who had been moderately interested in my project, became completely consumed by Paige. Every conversation was about Paige's needs, Paige's feelings, Paige's transition. My daily updates on the house, which had once been the centerpiece of dinner conversation, were now met with distracted nods. The focus had swiveled back to its natural resting place, my sister. Paige herself took an immediate and unsettling interest in my nearly finished house. She would wander over, barefoot and holding a green smoothie, and walk through the space as if she were inspecting a hotel suite. "Wow, you really went all out," she'd say, running a perfectly manicured finger along the quartz countertop I'd saved for months to afford. "This is way nicer than Mom and Dad's old guest room." She'd then offer unsolicited design advice. "You know what would look amazing in here? A big, round, fluffy pink chair for my aesthetic." I'd just smile tightly and say, "I was thinking of a more neutral palette, actually." The comments grew more pointed. "It's kind of big for just one person, isn't it?" she mused one afternoon, gazing out the large picture window that overlooked my parents' garden. "You must get lonely in here all by yourself." The implication was clear. She saw a beautiful, finished space and immediately saw herself in it. My sanctuary was becoming her new object of desire. My parents, of course, encouraged this. "Why don't you show Paige your design software?" my mother would suggest. "Maybe she could give you some creative ideas." My father, ever the pragmatist, saw a different angle. "You know, Nancy, once you're settled, maybe Paige could stay with you for a little while, just until she gets back on her feet. The main house is feeling a bit crowded with all her things." I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. "Dad, it's a 2-bedroom house, but the second bedroom is my office." "I need it for work," he just shrugged. "Family helps family, Nancy." The final weeks of construction were tense. Paige was a constant presence, treating the construction site like her personal backdrop for Instagram stories. She deposed with power tools she didn't know how to use, a hard hat perched comically on her head, with captions like "Building my future, girl boss construction kick." It made my blood boil. She was turning my hard work, my sweat and financial sacrifice, into a prop for her fake online life. I tried to talk to my parents about it. I sat them down one evening and expressed my discomfort. "I feel like Paige sees this house as her own," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I built this for my future, my security. I need my own space." Hazel gave me a patronizing smile. "Oh, Nancy, don't be so dramatic. She's your sister. She's just excited for you. You've always been a little territorial." My father cleared his throat. "Paige has had a difficult time. We need to be supportive." "A little generosity wouldn't kill you, Nancy." The conversation was a brick wall. They didn't see me, they saw a resource. They didn't see my home, they saw a solution to the problem of Paige's return. The house wasn't a symbol of my success anymore. It was becoming a gilded cage, and I was beginning to realize the door was never meant to lock from the inside. The golden child had returned to her kingdom, and as always, I was just a humble court servant, expected to provide for the throne. The final inspection was scheduled for the following Friday, and as the day approached, the feeling of dread in my stomach grew heavier. I was about to be given the keys to my dream home, but I had a terrible feeling I wouldn't be the one to use them. The day of the final inspection was bright and sunny, a perfect California day that felt like a cruel joke. I had been up since dawn, cleaning every surface of the new house until it gleamed. The scent of fresh paint and new wood filled the air, a scent I had come to associate with pride and accomplishment. The city inspector was scheduled to arrive at 10 a.m., and I was a bundle of nervous energy. This was the last hurdle. After his approval, the house would officially be a legal, habitable dwelling. My dwelling. My parents and Paige said they wanted to be there for the big moment. I had naively interpreted this as a show of support. They arrived just as the inspector, a stern-looking man named Mr. Henderson, pulled up. They stood in the background, smiling and whispering to each other while I walked Mr. Henderson through the property. I showed him the plumbing, the electrical work, the foundation specs, answering all his technical questions with the confidence of someone who had overseen every single detail. He was thorough, tapping on walls, checking outlets, and scrutinizing the permits. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he stood in the center of the living room, clipboard in hand, and nodded. "Everything looks good, Ms. Miller," he said with a rare smile. "Your contractor did a fine job. You've got a solid, well-built home here. I'll sign off on the certificate of occupancy today. It'll be filed with the city by end of day. A wave of relief so powerful it almost made my knees buckle washed over me. I had done it. It was real. It was mine. I thanked him profusely as he left. When I turned around, my family was beaming. "Congratulations, Nancy," my mother chirped, pulling me into a stiff, perfumed hug. "We are so proud of you." My father shook my hand, a gesture he reserved for business deals. "A fine piece of real estate, Nancy, a great addition to the property value." Even Paige managed a convincing smile. "It's perfect, Nance, absolutely perfect." They suggested we celebrate with a special dinner that night. "My treat," my father announced magnanimously. "Let's go to that fancy Italian place downtown." I was still floating on a cloud of success and relief, and I readily agreed. This felt like a turning point. We were celebrating my achievement together. The dinner was a blur of expensive wine and polite conversation. They asked me about my plans for furnishing the house, and I excitedly described the pieces I had been saving on my Pinterest board. They nodded and smiled, their faces studies in practiced sincerity. Looking back, I can see the falseness in their eyes, the predatory gleam hidden beneath the veneer of familial pride. But at that moment, I was too happy, too willing to believe in the fantasy they were selling. When we returned home, they asked me to come into the main house for a nightcap. The four of us sat in the formal living room, the one reserved for important conversations. The celebratory mood had evaporated, replaced by a thick, heavy silence. My father cleared his throat, the same way he had when he first proposed the idea of the house. "Nancy," he began, his voice devoid of its earlier warmth, "now that the house is officially completed and certified, there's something we need to discuss." He slid a crisp white envelope across the polished coffee table towards me. It was thick, official-looking. My name was typed on the front. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's a formal notice," my father said, his eyes as cold and hard as stones. "As the owners of this property, we are terminating your tenancy agreement." I stared at him, my mind refusing to process the words. This had to be a joke, a sick, twisted joke. "What are you talking about? Our agreement? You said I could live there as long as I wanted." Hazel spoke up, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "We know that was the initial idea, dear, but circumstances have changed. Paige needs a place to live, a real home where she can get her life back on track and feel secure." Paige, who had been sitting silently, looked down at her lap, the very picture of a reluctant, tragic heroine. "Paige," I sputtered, turning to look at my sister. "This is for Paige. You're giving my house to Paige." "We're not giving it to her, Nancy," my father corrected me sharply. "We are allowing her to live in the secondary dwelling on our property, as is our right. The building is a permanent fixture on our land, therefore it is legally ours. You were simply the financier." The word hit me like a physical blow. Financier. Not the designer, not the project manager, not the daughter who poured her life savings and her soul into creating a home. Just a bank. I ripped open the envelope. Inside was a legal document, a 30-day eviction notice, citing the termination of our informal, non-binding agreement. And stapled to it was a cashier's check for a fraction of what I had spent on the construction. A sum my father had calculated as my initial investment. Conveniently forgetting to account for 2 years of my labor, the cost overruns I had personally covered, and the market value I had added to his property. "This is insane," I said, the papers trembling in my hand. "You can't do this, I have our agreement." "That piece of paper?" my father scoffed. "It's not a legally binding lease, Nancy. It has no standing. We had a lawyer look at it. It was a familial understanding, and the family's needs have evolved." He said it so calmly, so rationally, as if he were discussing a quarterly report. I looked at my mother, my eyes pleading for her to intervene, to say this was all a terrible mistake. She wouldn't meet my gaze. "Paige needs us right now, Nancy," she murmured. "She's been through so much. You're strong. You'll land on your feet. You always do." Her words were meant to sound like a compliment, but they were the cruelest cut of all. My strength was not a virtue to them, it was a convenience. It meant they could kick me down, again and again, confident that I would just get back up on my own, requiring no effort from them. I was no longer their daughter, I was an obstacle. The house was never for me. It was a long-term investment plan. They had used my skills, my money, and my desperate need for their approval to build a custom rental unit for their favored child, all while making me think it was my dream coming true. The entire project, the smiles, the encouragement, the shared excitement, had been a meticulously constructed lie. I had not just built a house. I had built the instrument of my own betrayal. And as I sat there, surrounded by the three people who had just surgically removed my heart, I felt something inside me break. And in its place, something cold, hard, and sharp began to grow. For the first 48 hours after the celebratory dinner, I was in a state of shock. I went back to my apartment, the eviction notice and the insulting check sitting on my kitchen counter like a radioactive spill. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just stared at the wall, replaying the last 2 years in my head, each memory now tainted with the bitter poison of deceit. Every encouraging word from my mother, every piece of financial advice from my father, was a calculated move in a long con. They hadn't just taken a house from me. They had stolen my time, my savings, my trust, and my foolish, stubborn hope that I could one day earn my place in my own family. The grief was paralyzing, but on the third day something shifted. The profound, bottomless sadness began to curdle into a white-hot, diamond-hard rage. They thought I was strong. They thought I would just land on my feet. They had no idea. They had mistaken my resilience for weakness, my quiet competence for compliance. They had created a monster of efficiency and diligence, and now I was going to turn all of that methodical, detail-oriented energy against them. They wanted to play business? Fine. I would be the most ruthless CEO they had ever met. My first call was to my old friend from college, Patrick. While I had gone into architecture, he had pursued law, specializing in the driest, most complicated field imaginable, real estate and zoning bylaws. He was a walking encyclopedia of legal minutiae, a man who found beauty in the fine print. When I told him the story, he was silent for a full minute. Then he let out a low whistle. "Nancy, they played you. Hard," he said, his voice a mixture of sympathy and professional outrage. "That tenancy and perpetuity agreement is worth less than the paper it's printed on. Your father, the accountant, knew exactly what he was doing. It's designed to look like a promise while being legally unenforceable." "So that's it?" I asked, my voice cracking. "There's nothing I can do, they just get to keep it." "Not so fast," Patrick said, and I could almost hear him leaning forward at his desk. "They may own the land, and the structure is now technically a fixture on that land. But you were the builder. You were the one who pulled the permits. You were the one who dealt with the city. They made a critical mistake, Nancy. They underestimated your involvement. Let me see everything. The blueprints, the permits, the signed agreement, every email, every receipt, everything." I spent the rest of the day gathering a mountain of paperwork. I had documented every single step of the construction process with meticulous, almost obsessive detail. It was just my nature as a designer. I had digital copies, hard copies, and cloud backups. I sent Patrick a file so large it almost crashed his server. He called me back the next day, and his voice was electric with discovery. "Okay, I've been digging and I've found a few things. Beautiful, glorious, and incredibly boring things. Your parents are suburbanites, right? They know how to deal with family drama, but I guarantee they don't know the city's building code, Appendix D, subsection 12, paragraph C. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I felt the first spark of hope. "First," he explained, "the certificate of occupancy. It was issued to you, Nancy Miller, as the designated agent for the project. The city sees you as the primary responsible party. That's a small thing, but it helps establish a pattern." "Okay," I said, writing it down. "Second, and this is the fun part, let's talk about easements and access rights. Your father owns the property, but to build a legal secondary dwelling, he had to grant certain access rights for utilities, water, sewer, electricity. I've looked at the utility filings. They're standard, but they're all connected to the main house's services. There's no separate metering." "I know," I said. "Dad said it would be cheaper to run it all from their meters, and I could just pay them a portion of the bills every month." Patrick laughed, a short, sharp bark. Of course he did. Cheaper, but also stupider. It means the secondary unit is not an independently serviced dwelling. According to Municipal Code 744B, a rental unit must be independently metered for utilities. If it is, and it can't be legally rented out to a third party. It can only be used by the primary property owner or their immediate family. But Paige is immediate family, I countered, feeling my hope dim. Ah, but is she a tenant? If they charge her even $1 of rent, they are in violation. And if she's living there for free, you could make a compelling argument that this entire scheme was a fraudulent way to build a non-compliant family asset, using your money under false pretenses. It was complicated, but I was following. The real bombshell came next. "Nancy, what do you know about designated building envelopes?" he asked. "I know what they are," I said. "It's the specific area on a property where you're allowed to build." "Exactly," he said. "I was looking at your original survey and the final approved plans. You built right up to the very edge of the allowable envelope, especially near the back fence. It's a 5-foot setback, standard for the area." "Right," I said, remembering how careful I had been to maximize the floor space. Well, I did some more digging. 3 years ago, the city passed a new environmental bylaw to protect mature tree root systems. Any construction within 10 feet of a protected species of tree, like, for example, that big old oak tree on your parents' property line, requires a special root protection permit and a pre-construction arborist's report. A cold silence fell over the phone line. I knew the tree he was talking about. It was a massive, 100-year-old oak that stood majestically at the back of the yard. We didn't get an arborist's report," I said slowly. "My dad handled the initial permit applications. He said it was all standard." "I'm sure he did," Patrick said, his voice grim. "But it wasn't. That bylaw is obscure, but it's on the books. Nancy, your house, as it stands, is in violation of a municipal environmental protection bylaw. The foundation is almost certainly encroaching on the tree's critical root zone." I felt my breath catch in my throat. "What does that mean?" "It means," Patrick said, savoring the words, "that the city could, if properly notified by a concerned citizen, issue a stop work order. Or, since the work is already done, they could issue a remediation order." Remediation? They could declare the structure non-compliant. They could levy massive fines. Or, in a worst-case scenario, they could order the part of the structure that's in violation to be removed. Removed? The word echoed in my mind. He meant demolished. Anonymously notifying the city about the violation wouldn't just cause problems for my parents, it would destroy my own work. It was a scorched earth option. But then I thought about Paige, sipping a matcha latte in the sun-filled living room I designed, posting selfies from the balcony I framed with my own hands. I thought about my father's smug, dismissive face as he slid that eviction notice across the table. My beautiful, perfect house was already gone. It had been taken from me. The only question was whether I would let them keep it. The rage that had been simmering inside me now had a direction. It had a plan, and it had teeth. Legal, bureaucratic, and incredibly sharp teeth. The plan Patrick and I devised was not one of swift, explosive revenge. It was a slow-acting poison, a death by 1,000 paper cuts, designed to turn my beautiful creation into a source of unending misery for my family. The goal wasn't just to take the house away from them. It was to make them rue the day they ever thought they could cross an architectural designer who knew their creation down to the last nail. The first step was malicious compliance. My 30-day eviction notice was ticking away. Instead of fighting it, I embraced it. I sent my parents a formal, registered letter informing them that I would be vacating the premises on the specified date. I was polite, professional, and compliant. This was crucial. I needed them to believe I had been defeated, that I had accepted my fate and was slinking away with my tail between my legs. Their relief was palpable. My mother called me, her voice oozing with condescending pity. "I'm so glad you're being mature about this, Nancy. It's for the best, and we'll always be here for you, you know." I just hummed in agreement, biting my tongue so hard I tasted blood. During those 30 days, I began my work. I wasn't just moving out, I was preparing the house. My masterpiece was about to become a Trojan horse. I had the original blueprints, of course, but I also had what we in the industry call the as-built drawings, the final, detailed plans of the house as it was actually constructed, including every hidden detail. This was my map. I started with the things they would never notice until it was too late. The high-end, smart home system I had installed controlled everything: the lights, the thermostat, the security cameras. I was the sole administrator. Before I left, I factory reset the entire but instead of setting it up for them, I installed a custom firmware, a little backdoor I had programmed myself. On the surface, it would work fine, but I retained ultimate admin control from a remote server. They would think they were in charge of their smart home, but I would always hold the master key. Next was the plumbing. I had installed a top-of-the-line water heater with a digital control panel. It was efficient and powerful. It also had a vacation mode, which significantly lowers the temperature to save energy. I accessed the unit's advanced settings and programmed a recurring schedule. Every day, during peak shower times, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., the unit would automatically switch to vacation mode. The water would run lukewarm at best. It would then reset to normal temperature an hour later. A plumber would check the unit, see it working perfectly, and find nothing wrong. It would be a maddening, intermittent problem they could never solve. Then I turned my attention to the little details that would drive a person insane. The beautiful, custom-built closet in the master bedroom had a sleek, handle-less design. It opened with a gentle push, thanks to a magnetic latch. I spent an afternoon meticulously recalibrating that latch. I weakened it just enough so that it wouldn't hold the door securely. Any slight vibration, a person walking heavily, a door closing elsewhere in the house, would cause the closet door to slowly, silently swing open. It would be a constant, ghostly presence in the room. I went through the house, room by room, planting these little seeds of chaos. A loosened floorboard under the main walkway that would produce an incessant, unfixable squeak. A tiny, imperceptible shim placed under one leg of the kitchen island, ensuring that anything round would slowly roll off. I even went into the attic and slightly misaligned the satellite dish for the premium cable package I knew Paige would insist on. It would work most of the time, but during heavy rain or wind, the signal would pixelate and fail. My masterpiece of petty revenge, however, was in the garden. I had designed a beautiful, low-maintenance yard with a state-of-the-art sprinkler system. The day before I moved out, I accidentally broke off a single sprinkler head, one located in a flower bed right next to the house's foundation. I didn't just break it. I made sure the underground pipe was aimed directly at a small, almost invisible vent for the crawlspace. Then, I programmed the sprinkler system. I set Zone 4, the broken head zone, to run for 20 minutes. Not every day. That would be too obvious. I set it to run once every 3 days, at 3 a.m. for weeks, maybe months. It would go unnoticed. A slow, steady jet of water, spraying directly into the crawlspace, creating the perfect environment for dampness, mold, and rot to fester in the very bones of the house. On my final day, I did one last walkthrough. The house was pristine, beautiful, and utterly perfect on the surface, but I knew it was riddled with carefully concealed flaws. It was a perfectly engineered nightmare. I left the keys on the gleaming quartz countertop, the one Paige loved so much, along with the manuals for all the appliances, all neatly arranged in a binder. I even included a welcome card. "Dear Paige," it read, "I hope you love this house as much as I do. I truly built it to last. All the best, Nancy." As I closed the door for the last time, I didn't feel sad. I felt a cold, calm sense of satisfaction. They thought they had won. They were about to move their precious princess into her castle. They had no idea that I was the architect of that castle, and I had designed a secret dungeon right beneath the throne room. The housewarming party was in 2 weeks. I wasn't invited, of course, but I knew I wouldn't miss it. I would be watching the whole thing unfold from a distance. 2 weeks after I moved out, the invitations for Paige's housewarming party went out. Not to me, of course, but I heard about it from mutual family friends who called, their voices laced with awkward pity, to ask if I was okay. The invitation, I was told, was a gaudy affair featuring a professional photo of Paige posing on the porch of her new home. The fury that lanced through me was sharp, but I pushed it down. It wasn't time yet. The main event was still to come. The day of the party, I sat in my apartment, a new lease signed, my few belongings arranged around me. It was sparse, but it was mine, untainted by my family's treachery. On my laptop, I had 2 windows open. One was a live feed from the city planning department's public portal. The other was an anonymous email account I had created. At 6 p.m., as the party was scheduled to begin, I sent my first email. It was addressed to the head of the Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Office. The subject line was Concerned Citizen Report, Potential Building Code Violation at my parents' address. In the email, I politely and anonymously detailed my concern about a new structure built dangerously close to a protected heritage oak tree, citing the specific bylaw, Environmental Bylaw 34F, Section 2, that I knew had been violated. I attached a screenshot from the public property records showing the tree's location and the outline of the new house. I clicked send. Then I waited. I knew bylaw officers didn't typically work on Saturday nights, but my email would be sitting at the top of their inbox on Monday morning. This was just the opening salvo. The real fun began at 7 p.m. from the gossip I'd gathered. I knew the party would be in full swing by then, filled with my parents' smug friends and Paige's equally vapid influencer crowd. It was time to test my little backdoors. I logged into the remote server I had set up. The Smart Homes Hub appeared on my screen. I had full control. I started small. I watched the security camera feed, the one I had discreetly aimed at the main living area, and saw Paige holding court, a glass of champagne in her hand. I smiled and toggled a command. In the house, every single smart bulb began to flicker, like something out of a horror movie. The music, streaming through the Sonos system I had installed, sputtered and died. I let the chaos reign for about 30 seconds, then returned everything to normal. On the camera, I could see the confused looks, the nervous laughter. Paige was flustered, blaming the new tech. An hour later, as my father was likely boasting to his friends about his savvy real estate acumen, I made my next move. The party had moved to the backyard, centered around the beautiful deck I had designed. I accessed the sprinkler system controls. I bypassed the schedule and manually activated all zones at once, including the special Zone 4. Suddenly, every sprinkler head erupted, drenching the designer-clad guests, the catered food on the tables, and my fuming father. People shrieked and ran for cover. And while they were all distracted, a steady, powerful stream of water from the broken sprinkler head was shooting directly into the crawlspace vent, a secret assault on the house's foundation. On the camera feed, I watched Paige run inside, her silk dress ruined, her face a mask of fury. Throughout the night, I continued my campaign of technological terror. I remotely turned the thermostat up to a sweltering 85 degrees. I locked the smart lock on the front door, so late-arriving guests couldn't get in. I even used the smart speakers to play, at a low, barely audible volume, a single, repeating C-sharp note, a frequency known to cause feelings of unease and anxiety. The house was no longer a home, it was a psychological weapon. The grand finale, however, wasn't mine to command. It arrived on Monday morning. At around 10:30 a.m., I received a call from Patrick. His voice was brimming with excitement. "You are not going to believe this," he said. "Your anonymous tip worked better than we could have ever hoped. The head of bylaw enforcement is a notorious environmentalist, a real stickler. He saw your email this morning, drove over there himself, and saw the violation. He's issued a full stop work order." "But the work is already done," I said. "Exactly," Patrick crowed. "So it's a remediation and compliance order. And it gets better. Because the violation concerns a protected tree, it triggered an automatic review of the entire building permit file. And they found it, Nancy. They found the lack of an arborist report. The permit is being declared invalid retroactively." I couldn't breathe. "What does that mean, Patrick?" In English. "It means the house, as it stands, is an illegal structure. They have 90 days to submit a remediation plan, which would involve hiring an engineer to see if the foundation can be partially removed without killing the tree, which is impossible, or they face daily fines of $1,000. If they can't comply, the city has the right to order the demolition of the non-compliant structure at the owner's expense. Demolition. The word was real now. It was on an official city document, likely being delivered to my parents' front door at that very moment. The house, my beautiful, stolen house, was now a $1 million liability. My parents hadn't just given Paige a home, they had given her a ticking time bomb. My phone rang again. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father. Voicemail, then Paige. Voicemail. The texts started flooding in. Nancy, call me immediately. You have to help us. This is your fault. What did you do? What did I do? I did exactly what they taught me to do. I was strong. I landed on my feet. And I learned from my father that when it comes to business, you use every loophole and every bit of leverage you have to protect your assets. They had just made the fatal error of teaching that lesson to the wrong daughter. The housewarming was over. The demolition had just begun. The fallout was spectacular. My parents, faced with an unfixable compliance issue and mounting daily fines, tried everything. They hired their own lawyer, who, after reviewing the case, likely told them what Patrick had told me. They were caught, dead to rights. Their attempt to quietly build an asset for their favorite child had run afoul of an inflexible, unforgiving Muni. Simple bylaw. The irony was delicious. My father, a man who lived by rules and numbers, was being destroyed by a rule he had been too arrogant to read. They tried to blame me, of course. In a series of screaming phone calls, which I recorded on Patrick's advice, they accused me of sabotaging them, of being a vindictive, ungrateful child. I put my heart, my soul, and my entire life savings into that house. I told them calmly during one of my father's tirades. A house you assured me was for me. You used me. This isn't my fault. This is the consequence of your own greed and dishonesty. You wanted to play hardball. You just didn't realize I was the one who designed the stadium. Paige, predictably, fell apart. Her dream of a free, custom-built home evaporated. Life in the nightmare house was unbearable. The intermittent hot water, the flickering lights, the strange noises, she was convinced the place was haunted. She lasted less than a month before packing her bags and moving back into her old bedroom in the main house, complaining that the place had bad energy. My parents were trapped. They couldn't afford the fines and the cost to even attempt a remediation, which would involve specialized engineers and excavators, was astronomical, with no guarantee of success. They couldn't sell the property, as the illegal structure was now a massive red flag on the title. Their only legally and financially viable option was the one the city had presented: demolish the house and restore the land to its original state. They had to take out a second mortgage on their main house to pay for the demolition. The beautiful little home I had designed, the one filled with so much hope and light, was torn down by a wrecking crew. I didn't go to watch. I didn't need to. Seeing the demolition order from the city was enough. The check they had given me as a paltry payoff, I had never cashed it. I ripped it into tiny pieces and mailed it back to them with a simple note. Consider this my final contribution. The financial strain broke them. My father's meticulously planned retirement was up in smoke. They had to sell their large family home and downsize to a small condo in a less desirable part of town, with Paige still living with them, a constant reminder of their failed scheme. Their social standing in the community was shattered. The story of how they had cheated their hardworking daughter only to end up with a pile of debt and a dirt patch in their yard became the stuff of local legend. As for me, I thrived. The story of what I had done and how I had done it circulated among my professional peers. While some saw it as cold, most saw it as brilliant. I had used my intimate knowledge of my own project, combined with a mastery of municipal code, to execute a flawless counterattack. A few months after the demolition, I was headhunted by a major development firm. They weren't just impressed by my design portfolio, they were impressed by my strategic thinking and my ruthless attention to detail. "We need someone who can see a project from every angle," my new boss told me during the interview. "Someone who can spot a liability a mile away. You've proven you can do that." They offered me a position as a senior project manager with a salary that dwarfed what I was making before, plus a significant signing bonus. I took that bonus and used it as a down payment on my own place. Not a house I built myself, but a beautiful condo with a city view. One that was mine in every legal and emotional sense of the word. I haven't spoken to my parents or Paige since that final, furious phone call. I have no family left in the traditional sense. But what I lost in blood ties, I gained in self-respect. They thought my value was in what I could produce for them. They saw me as a tool, a means to an end. They were right about one thing: I am strong. I am resilient. But strength isn't about how much you can endure. It's about knowing when to stop enduring and start fighting back. They wanted to tear down my future, so I tore down the house they tried to steal. From the ashes of their backyard, I built my own empire, on a foundation of my own making, with blueprints they could never read and a structure they could never touch.